Hi, I'm Laura Beaton, and I am a visual fine artist working in sumi-e and Chinese brush painting, as well as Western abstract acrylics. Before we get started, just remember that this is an overview of my processes for sumi-e and Chinese brush painting and is not meant for instructional purposes. As an artist, what I'm especially and probably best known for is my sumi-e and Chinese brush work, where I like to bring Canadian themes into these traditional art forms. Over the years, I've been fortunate to have my work recognized internationally. One of my paintings, the one you see on the screen, is even part of the permanent collection of the Chinese government, and I've received awards in China and Japan. I've also had the privilege of studying with master artists here in Canada as well as China, which has shaped how I approach this practice. Now, sumi-e and Chinese brush painting may look simple at first, but they are not simple art forms to master. Each brushstroke carries weight and intention, and years of practice go into what might seem like effortless lines. That's part of what makes it so beautiful, the balance of discipline and spontaneity. Today, I'd love to walk you through my basic process and give you a sense of what goes into creating a sumi-e or Chinese brush painting, and hopefully share some of the joy that keeps me inspired. What is sumi-e? Well, it's a traditional Japanese art form, and it is closely related to Chinese brush painting, but with its own distinct character. It is created almost entirely with black ink, sometimes touched with a hint of color. The purpose of sumi-e is not to capture every detail, but to express the very essence of a subject. Viewers are invited to fill in the blanks, to reflect, and to appreciate the beauty of what appears simple, though in truth it is a highly disciplined and challenging art form. What is Chinese brush painting? Well, it is also an ancient art form. It's full of tradition and rules. Like sumi-e, it uses the same black ink, but unlike sumi-e, color is always added with Chinese paints. There are two main styles. One is spontaneous, where the brushstrokes are free and expressive, and the other is detail, where precision and refinement are key. What really makes a painting succeed, though, are the gradations, the subtle shifts in tone and shading that give depth and life to the work. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of rules with sumi-e in Chinese brush painting, and just to help the viewer understand, we need to fill in some gaps here. There are a lot of different types of papers and brushes, and each has its own purpose and each is used for its own technique. For land and seascapes, the paintings must run off the paper. That is the norm, that is typical. And again, for both art forms, you have to have a balance of ink and strong, confident brushstrokes. There also must be enough space left to convey the chi, or the breath of the painting. Does the painting flow? Is there enough space? The space is actually just as important as the painted area of the art. Delving into my personal artistic style, I like to bring together different mediums and cultural traditions while weaving in my Canadian heritage, respecting each culture. I have been privileged and am grateful for the blessings of many Chinese and Japanese master artists in my artistic journey. A great example of this is the painting dovetailing. The background is created using suminagashi, a centuries-old Japanese technique. At first glance, it resembles marble, but the process is much more complex than simply pouring ink onto water, as it requires patience, precision, and flow. You do actually manipulate the ink. In the foreground, you'll find the delicate forms of Chinese brush painting, visible in the detail of the doves and the butterflies. These elements bring life and movement to the piece, contrasting yet harmonizing with the flowing background. Running along the veins of the suminagashi are printed lyrics in English as written and sung by Canadian jazz musician Jacqueline Holmes. She invited me to listen to the title track of her CD Dovetailing and create a work of art inspired by her song. It was an exciting day watching the culmination of my work being included in Jacqueline's music video. She was thrilled with how I incorporated her lyrics into the painting. The result is a true collaboration across cultures and disciplines, Japanese technique, Chinese brushwork, and Canadian music woven together in one unified piece. Here you can see my setup for working on two large pieces at once. I usually paint between 2 and 4 works in tandem, moving back and forth to keep my perspective fresh. This rhythm lets me notice details I might otherwise overlook if I focused on just one. Because the paper is so large, it extends beyond the table, sometimes draping over my lap and legs as I paint. It's an immersive experience, as though the artwork physically surrounds me. Before I even begin, I always assess the humidity in my studio. Moisture in the air has a direct impact on how the brush responds to ink and water. Some days the brush behaves one way, while the next day the very same brush feels and works like it is completely different. Adjusting to these subtle changes is part of the challenge and the beauty of the process. Prior to dipping my brush into any ink, I will meditate for 10 to 15 minutes to just clear my mind of anything and everything, ready to focus on my art and get into the zone. For me, nothing else exists at that point in time. I then take out my ink stick, an ink stone, which is in Japanese, the ink stone is called a suzuri. It takes about 2 minutes to grind the ink, and it is interesting to feel the transition in the ink throughout the grinding process. I frequently paint on the paper once I've heavily sprayed it with water. Try to imagine painting on a wet paper towel, yet the paper I use is much, much thinner and more delicate than a paper towel. It does get quite interesting. The paper is also this delicate at the wet mounting stages, and quite frankly, it's quite terrifying. Now, throughout the process, I need to decide if I'm going to actually display this artwork under a glass frame or on a wooden gallery panel. Typically, I do prefer the wooden gallery panels, but they must be prepped. And in order to prevent any warpage or any damage at all that the water may cause or could cause to the wood, I first apply 2 coats of golden GAC 100 on all sides, top and underneath. That's a 2-day process. It does take a good 24 hours between coats for them to dry. It's especially important as well due to our Canadian climate and regular changes in humidity. On the right and on the top of the panel, I've applied 2 coats of white paint and primer combined, and on the sides, I apply a complementary tinted color paint. The sides are finished ultimately with a matte varnish. Once ink has been applied to the paper, it can easily crease, wrinkle, and ripple. So therefore, wet mounting is necessary to flatten a finished piece of art and get it ready to be framed or mounted onto a substrate, such as a wooden uh, panel or placed under a glass frame. This is a step that causes me the most anxiety and worry. It is very, very difficult, at least for me, especially when working with very large pieces of paper. Think of it as doing a somersault from one floor mat onto an adjacent floor mat, but flipping mid-air so that your somersault becomes a backflip upon landing. That's how it feels. Traditionally, the individuals that perform this part of the process, they're known as masters unto themselves. It takes a lot of training, years and years of practice to perfect this art form, and it is considered an art form. The art is placed uh, the good side down. It is sprayed wet. It's then brushed and flattened onto a huge piece of wood. Air bubbles and wrinkles are brushed out, etc. Then on an adjacent piece of wood, I do the same thing with a backing piece of paper, but then I apply some glue to it. It's called Jinshofu. That, of course, I have to cook, cool, and strain it in advance. Then I lift the art, flip it upside down so that it's right side up, and place it onto the backing paper on the second board, and then get all the air bubbles, etc. removed. Remember that both pieces of paper are quite wet and fragile at this stage, just like we saw previously with my finger poking through the paper. Honestly, this is the stuff of nightmares. Talk about a big oops. What can I say? This is a wet mounting job gone horribly wrong on every level. It was a disaster. And this actually is the life of a sommelier and Chinese brush painter. This next stage takes about 2 days to complete. So on the left, you've got the artwork. It's been glued onto the gallery panel. But now I got to make sure that that the bubbles remain out of the painting. So I roll saran wrap on top of the painting, and I use a long piece of ABS pipe. And then I place books over the entire surface. I leave it like that for at least 24 hours. Then I remove the saran wrap, and it takes another day at least for that painting to dry completely. Once the plastic food wrap is covering the entire painting, then heavy books and items are placed on top of the entire surface and left for 24 hours. Remember, at this stage, the painting is still wet from the glue that I've used to adhere the art to the panel. After 24 hours, the plastic wrap is rolled back onto the ABS pipe for future use, and the painting, which is still damp, will take another full day to dry. Now, once the artwork is dry, I need to trim the excess paper, and I found the most effective way of trimming it is by using a sand block with 50 grit paper. I swipe the edges of the panel at an angle, one way, and never back and forth. It's a great feeling to see the clean edges of my art. It's a wonderful, wonderful feeling at this stage, and a relief, quite frankly. One of the final stages of getting a piece of artwork gallery ready is photographing it and cataloging it. That unto itself would be another video, but suffice to say, it's very time consuming, and rice paper, this art form, does not photograph well. I've had so many people say to me, wow, your artwork looks beautiful in person, but in a video, on paper, online, the photos just don't do it justice. So that is a fact of life that sommelier and Chinese brush painting artists, we are all aware of. And as I say, we go with the flow, but either way, we still need to have it photographed, still need to catalog it, and then we're able to start marketing. As all Japanese and Chinese brush painters are aware, art that has been created on paper, especially rice or washi, remember the Japanese papers, it just does not photograph well. This truly is an art form that demands an in-person viewing, as photographs do not do the art justice. However, photographing and cataloging the art is an important and vital part of the journey of a professional artist. You know, if I had not done this, if I had not photographed it or cataloged it or marketed this artwork, Jacqueline Holmes would never have discovered my art and asked me to collaborate. Translated in Mandarin, Laura me- means Lawa. Lao meaning working, Wa meaning baby. It means that I was born working and I will die working. Um, Not quite sure where retirement fits in, but I'd sure like to discover that. Maybe I'll create a middle name for retirement. Personally, um, my seal is made of a stone chop that has been hand carved. It is my authenticated signature or seal. There are numerous rules about the use of seals, and I've made the trifecta of errors placing the wrong seal in the wrong place and in the wrong position, meaning either upside down, sideways, backwards, you name it, I've done it. The paste used to affix the seal comes in various colors. Cinnabar or the red is the most common, while there are also blue, yellow, green, white, and black pastes available. Japanese sumie and Chinese brush painting are art forms that take a lifetime to learn. There's always something to learn, which is what I love about them. They will make you cry, smirk, laugh. They will teach you patience. They've taught me when it is okay to break the rules, but it is only by knowing the rules and putting in the time that true experimentation becomes possible. This is what allows the art form to evolve into new realms, such as abstraction, keeping the art form alive for generations to come. I love what each culture brings to both a piece of art and to my life. My art is about weaving three cultures, being inclusive, finding balance, because you know what? I am Canadian. I thank you for your time and interest in learning about my process, and hopefully I've added a little bit of insight into these wonderful art forms of sumie and Chinese brush painting. Thanks again and have a wonderful, wonderful day.